the pale blue dot.
All right. Well, Johnny, welcome aboard the My Mate podcast.
Well, I feel very honoured to be invited.
That's great. No, just as a bit of a background, Johnny is my lovely uncle, and we've known each other for a while, ever since I was born.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty right.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah. John, do you want to just give the listeners and the guys watching a bit of a background, a bit who you are and why you're on the show, I guess?
Okay, well, I guess I'm originally from Adelaide, and I've lived most of my life in Adelaide. But when I was young, when I finished school, I joined the Christian Brothers because I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to work in sort of like Catholic schools in that era. And so I've worked all my life until last year in schools, but my last 25 years I was sort of like a director of spirituality in a big school in Adelaide. And when I retired, I thought, what do I want to do next? And I thought, spirituality is sort of my passion now, so I'd like to study. So I'm over here in Melbourne studying spirituality down the road here at the Jesuit College of Spirituality, and really enjoying it. And so that's a little bit about me and where I've come from and why I'm here.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Why did you find spirituality through the Christian faith?
Okay, that's a really big question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We're going right in. We're just going deep.
I guess I was sort of brought up in a Christian faith, in Catholicism, as we call it. And like most people, when I was young, I struggled a bit. And I sort of, I remember even, this sounds a funny thing to say, but when I was a young brother, I was sort of teaching and coaching sport and doing all the things you do when you're young. But I sort of had lost my sense of God a bit. And God had sort of retreated into the background, and I sort of realised when I was about 30 that, gee whiz, there's something wrong here. My motivation's not quite in kilter, so I started this search, and guess what I found? I found that within my own religious line there was all this hidden spirituality that I discovered, and it's, as I said to Tom before we started recording, it's our best kept secret.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So I've been on the search, and it's still, I think your whole life is a search, and I'm still on it, even though, as you can see from the colour of my hair, it's getting on a bit now, but I'm still on the search.
Well, I mean, you're 27 now, and you're looking a little bit... no. Look, I think one of the big... Because, you and I we've discussed, I think the mental health side of me, as soon as that became prevalent in my life, it was always a real search for meaning, and I think everyone goes through that in their own individual way, a search for meaning, and I went through different facets and all this sort of stuff, but I think what always fascinated me the most about you is obviously a loving relation in our family, and also just as friends as well, was how early you seem to have found the calling for spirituality. And I know you and I have discussed this many times, but it was that moment that you had, I think, when you were on a silent retreat. Just thought you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, I was actually in my mid-30s at that stage, and I was the principal of a school.
Yeah.
And I was struggling a bit and finding things a bit difficult. And I was sort of tossing up, well, do I stay in my calling in life, stay as a brother, or do I leave and look at pursuing marriage or being a father of a family? Because I think I probably would have been a reasonably good dad.
I think so.
And anyway, I was on this silent retreat, and I was sort of trying to pray and struggling and not getting anywhere. And I just had this strong inner feeling. It's all I can only describe it as a strong inner feeling that, hey, you're still looking over your shoulder. You haven't really made a decision to stick to your calling in life. So I walked outside, and it was on the Pacific Ocean. It was a place just south of Sydney, right on the Pacific Ocean. And there was actually a graveyard just there. And then you walk down to the beach. And I walked down towards the beach, and I just looked up, and there was this canopy of stars up there. It was like the universe displayed. And I just looked up and said, okay, God, you've got me. I'm going to stick at this.
Really?
Yeah, and I can't describe to you why I did that. I can only describe it as a strong inner feeling. I just thought, yep, I'm being tapped on the shoulder here to make a decision one way or the other.
Wow.
And I was like, right, okay.
And that was one.
This is it.
Yeah. And do most brothers, or I guess people of that faith, sort of have that moment, or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think I was probably lucky. Because it's the only time in my whole life I've had an experience like that, and some people can relate to it and say, yeah, I had something similar, and others say, oh no, I've never really never had a moment like that. I've never been sure that this is the right thing to do.
It's fascinating. I absolutely love it. So describe to us some of the feelings you were, in the period of life you were going through before you had that calling, because I think mental health is obviously, it's a big part of this podcast, and it's a big part of what the Mind Mate's all about. And if you could just talk about that.
Well, I've heard you talk about how you had a period in your life where you were very anxious or suffered a lot of anxiety, and I can relate to that a bit. I don't think I perhaps suffered it quite as strongly as you did, but I certainly did. And when I was, I was very busy as a young teacher and a young, when you're a teacher in a school, if you really take it seriously, you pretty well give your life to it, and it can dominate you. And I think I probably did that, and I wasn't. And every time I stopped, or I was having a holiday, or I stopped to think, I was aware of this underlying feeling of feeling a bit anxious about what I couldn't have told you. Just a bit unsure, about life, and bit fearful. I don't know whether you've ever had anything to do with the Enneagram, but it's a theory of that there are 9 basic personalities, and everyone belongs to one, and each of the 3, they're in groups of 3, has a different underlying emotion.
Right.
And my underlying emotion was fear.
Yeah.
And it would sort of surface there, and it was hanging around in the background. I was never really aware of it until I started to take time out and started doing things like these 6-day directed retreats, which are all silent. And so you have to really get in touch with what's going on inside of yourself. And it's then I started to look at myself and realise, well, what's going on here? Why am I feeling like this?
Wow.
And to start to come to grips with it. Now for me, different people have different answers, but for me I think it was that I wasn't really trusting in God. I was just trying to solve everything myself. Yeah. And I couldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And when I started to put a bit of trust there, it was amazing how the whole fear lessened.
So were those retreats, they were Christian based?
Yes, they were. Yeah, they were. And I don't think everybody has to find this meaning necessarily through Christianity, but for me, that was the way it worked. Because I sort of believe different religions and different people, even who haven't got religions, have different windows into this mystery we call God. Now, the Christian window, or the Catholic window, whatever you want to call it, is a good one for me, and it's meaningful for me. It might be meaningful for everybody else, but it's enabled me to get in touch with aspects of this mystery that I found really personally fulfilling in my life.
Absolutely, yeah. Because one thing that I'm really aiming to do towards the end of the year, hopefully, is the Vipassana retreat, which is a 10-day silent retreat through the Buddhist, I believe. I believe it's Buddhist, through the Buddhist way, but it's basically just, you can say the word prayer or meditation, you can say the word Vipassana or Christian-based silent retreat. It's all basic. The basic, practicality aspect of it is to just get a really good handle of who you are, and I think this is one of the reasons why I love having these chats with you so much, is because, it's so refreshing to hear that, spirituality or this understanding of God, especially for someone who was quite fearful of the traditional sense of the word God, it's about finding your own personal meaning and your own authenticity through who you are and getting deep within inside yourself, and then using that to good use and putting that, and almost leaving the world in a better place based on that merit. Do you resonate with that? Or?
Absolutely. I think if you become at peace within yourself and you develop that spiritual side of yourself, you're going to make the world a better place because of who you are. Yeah. Because you're going to be a better person. And if you really take it seriously, you can't be inauthentic and you can't do morally bad things. No. Because it's not true to who you are. And we all know there are people who have done those things. But I think, there's a lack of authenticity there when people act like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think it's very helpful for people to do that. Whether, as you say, whether you do it through Buddhism or through Christianity, both of those faiths have strong traditional meditation stances. I think in Christianity we have this more anthropomorphical, to use a big word, vision of God. I've got to be a bit like a person, whereas in Buddhism it's more finding your inner peace, as I understand it. But ultimately I think the two are probably the same thing.
So describe what you perceive to be God then, in a sense.
Right. Well, that's a really tough question. And that's changed in my life. When I was a little kid, and I had that old traditional view of the big man up in the clouds with the white beard, the long robe, all that.
Yes.
That's sort of long gone.
Caucasian white man.
But he probably was when I think back.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more nebulous now. But I probably still, because of the tradition of Christianity has been to see a personal God, I think I probably still relate to God as being like a person, albeit a person that's completely different to us in all ways. But I still like to have that personal relationship, and just occasionally look at this God figure as being like a really good friend who's there.
Yeah,
I can turn to every now and again and just have a really good chat from the heart with.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think even if you don't want to, view it as like a personal something, I mean, that understanding of, having two selves, having like a child, a self, an egotistical self that, a critical thinker, a monkey mind that always wants to, be the best and do all this and all that sort of stuff that I guess has kept us quite, pretty well and alive till 2018. But then this other self that is just like, this deep self of someone that I guess we need to connect with at the same time as well, I think that's important. I think the biggest thing for me that I always found difficult to understand when I was, studying religion and studying Christianity was the God in three parts, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit.
The Trinity concept.
Yeah. Is that, is there a one-word answer to that one, or like?
No.
Yeah.
There's not.
I still don't get it.
I see it as being God is relationship. That God is relationship, and it's all about relationship and relationships, and that way of looking at God, I suppose, emphasises that importance of relationship. And that's a mysterious entity that lots of people over hundreds of years have tried to explain in all sorts of different ways. From St. Patrick back in Ireland with his shamrock with the three-shaped leaf. None of them quite work completely, but I think it's God in relationship, and that God is in relationship with God's self and with us.
So you've got the human form, God as that nebulous entity, and then the spirit side of it as well.
Yeah, the spirit that's in the world.
Yeah, for sure. So how was it based on you learning and practicing your own spirituality more that your idea of God changed as you developed? Or?
I think so. I think, I mentioned that period where I felt I'd sort of lost God for a while, and I was sort of totally wrapped up in activism, just doing things.
Yeah.
And I was doing good things, but that was my whole life. And I had to sort of step back, and I was sort of in my mid-30s by then, and going into my 40s a bit later, and I was really lucky to have had two great formational experiences where I was given time out from my teaching and running schools to go away and do a course, and then that was the first one where I had that experience I described earlier. And then when I was about in my mid-40s, I got the chance to go to Boston and study at Boston College and do a master's degree in basically in spirituality. And that was just such a gift.
Yeah.
Such a great gift, time out, because it wasn't all just academic. I actually did spiritual, I took what we call spiritual direction. It's a bad word. It sounds like someone tells you what to do. It actually should be called spiritual accompaniment, where someone sits with you and listens to you and just reflects back to you, so you make your own thinking and decision about where you are in your relationship with God. And that's really, I found that really powerful. And that's why what I'm studying now is to become one of those sorts of people myself. But back then, what helped me was going through it and receiving it.
Absolutely.
And I began to see that God was completely different. A bit like you, I think you mentioned in your early life, you went through this fear factor of God.
Yeah.
I think that was a little bit in me too. When I think back to the young me, I was sort of never quite good enough.
Yeah.
I was always thinking, I'm never quite good enough. My life isn't perfect. I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And you sort of come to realise that that's irrelevant. That's the human condition. That if this force in the universe, this God, is totally loving, then you don't have to prove yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just have to be open.
And I think for me it was I was constantly trying to prove to myself that I was good enough, and I think the disillusionment I had then was that if I was trying to prove something to myself all the time, I didn't really know who I was. you know, and by coming to understand, you know, me at a deep level, I hope that always progresses, and I hope in 10 years' time I look back on this episode and go, wow, I didn't know who I was then, you know, but could end up being...
It's a lifelong process.
That's right.
I'm still getting there myself.
Yes.
I'm a lot older than you.
That's right. No, but I was trying to prove these things to myself that, you know, didn't really tie into who I really was, or I guess didn't really sit with me well. And of course they were never going to be good enough, because they were leading me down a path that I really feel meant to pursue, I guess. Yeah.
And also we can't reach perfection. It's impossible as human beings.
Yeah, and nor should we want to, because then if we're perfect, I mean, I'm perfect, but I don't know about you, Johnny, but yeah. But then
Still working on it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the hair's looking good. That's right. So, what about a time? So you've surpassed the 30s. You've found God in your life again as well.
Refound God. Yep.
Refound God.
Yep.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Yep, that's all right.
Were there any other testing times? Did you ever have any sort of testing moments?
Yeah, I guess so, but not dramatically so. But you know, life always throws up its little challenges. You know, there were times when I was disappointed that I thought I might have got this position or that position and I didn't get it. And then you've got to cope with that and say, oh well, it just wasn't meant to be. You know, there's something else will come along. And so there's little setbacks like that. I was lucky that my parents lived both on until I was fairly old. My mother only died 4 years ago. And loss of parents is always something you've got to stop shooting your tracks, and
of course,
and makes you think about it, what life's all about,
yeah,
where you're going. So there were little things all along the way that I had to sort of cope with and come to grips with. But I think I've probably been fairly lucky that I haven't had major crises to cope with. Probably the worst was when I finished my studies in Boston. I got really sick, and no one could diagnose what was wrong with me. And that's when I started to question myself. I thought, oh, is this all mental? Oh, sure it wasn't, but you have to ask that question. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I'd been bitten by a tick.
Yeah.
And they found out I had something called rickettsia, but it was 7 years later before I was diagnosed. So I had to just slowly go through feeling not great, slowly recovering, coping with life. And that was a bit of a test. Yeah, until I finally thought, good, that's what I've got. You take an antibiotic and you start to improve.
Wow. So how quickly did you improve? Just what, a week or something? Or?
Sorry?
Did you improve within a week? Or
no, it was slow and gradual.
Yeah, right.
It was just one of those things, once it gets into you, what it does is the tick dies after a while, but it sets off an infection inside of you, and it taxes your energy levels, and you just feel pretty lousy.
Yeah.
And I was back at a school and working and trying to fulfil expectations and feeling as though my energy levels were about zero.
Yeah.
I found that hard.
That's fair.
Hard to cope with. But I was conscious that as each year went by, I was getting a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then when I finally realised, when this clever doctor came along, he said, I think I know what you've got, and gave me the blood test.
Really?
Things improved quite dramatically. But that tested my sense of self-belief and my faith and everything else, struggling with that illness for a while until I got on top of it. So that's probably the worst thing I've had to cope with.
Sure. Yeah. And so when those little tests do come about, you know, we mentioned before meditation, and all different sorts of things.
Okay.
How do you? What are your practices? I guess.
Well, the big thing that came from those times out I had was I discovered a totally new form of praying, and it's called in the Catholic tradition centering prayer, or you can just call it meditation. But it's virtually sitting, sitting in a chair with your back straight, in a quiet, private place for about 20 minutes. And usually you get a mantra or something you say quietly to yourself, which is a bit similar to, I think, to the Buddhist meditation you were talking about.
And the Buddhist meditation.
But you can use a mantra that has got a religious connotation or not, and you go quietly into yourself. And I've found that's made a dramatic change in my life since I discovered that I've only been doing that form of meditation - praying for about 15 years, 20 years, but I've noticed it's had great outer effects. I'm a lot calmer, I'm more relaxed, and I do it every day. I get up, I have my shower, sometimes have my breakfast first, or sometimes just sit and do the meditation. If I don't do it, I feel my whole day isn't quite right or isn't quite centered. So that's probably the biggest change I've had in my life, is discovering that form of, as I say, you can call it meditation, you can call it centering prayer, whatever you like, but that's what it's much the same.
It literally is astonishing to me. I mean, so to give you an example of how I wake up, right?
Yes.
I'll wake up, I'll do my best when the alarm goes off to wake up. I'll have a bit of apple cider vinegar and water just to get the digestive health nice and alkalized, I believe it is. I'll stand out in the sun and do some like interpretive dance for like 5 minutes just to get some body movement. I'll breathe nice and heavily and jump into a cold shower to boost my immunity.
Oh, a cold shower, that's impressive.
Super cold, that's right. And then I'll meditate for about 20 minutes. My meditation sounds exactly the same as what you've been doing for 25 years. And it's just so interesting for me to hear that as someone, not to bring this about me, but someone who was very fearful of the understanding of the concept of eternal hell and, developing OCD from that.
Yeah.
Then I became a very passionate atheist to suppress that fear, and then I guess finding it again a little bit. And I don't really know what to call it. I don't really know whether... I need to, I guess, further my theological studies, in all sorts of religion, or maybe just no religion, to see which one that, I guess, works for me or doesn't work. But it's fascinating to me that, in definitely calling myself so very happy now, that it sounds, similar, although I'm practicing it here and you're practicing it there, that it's kind of similar,
Well, it's spirituality, isn't it? And it's the same process, basically. Maybe coming from slightly different orientations.
So how does that change I guess, have you taught religion at schools? I know you were obviously at Ross Trevor, I was at St. John's. Have you taught it with that similar sort of thing, that understanding of...
Yeah, I started using it in class, and I found I was in an all-boys school and the boys loved it.
Yeah, right.
They loved meditation. Sometimes I'd let them lie flat on the carpet, and there were possibly
snoring?
false motivations there. So we did actually have a couple fall asleep.
Yeah.
But they would beg me. They'd say, we're going to do meditation this week.
Yeah.
So they really did like it, and I think it's because the modern youth are so much wrapped up in their iPhones or their smartphones, and they're constantly in communication or listening to music, that when they're actually encouraged, or in this case forced, to take 20 minutes off totally away from that, getting in touch with your inner self, it was like a revelation to them.
Absolutely.
And I found they really liked it. And so I started doing that regularly in my classes right up until when I finished teaching last year.
And then, I guess, do you teach the theory of Christianity is... I mean, just from my understanding, is that they're all, the Christian faith and all this stuff, teaching about how to live a better life, essentially. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, Christianity and the church probably hasn't helped here, has got terribly wrapped up and mixed up with all sorts of teachings about this, that and the other.
Right.
That somehow I think it's clouded the essential message. Just love God, love yourself, and love your neighbour like you love yourself. That sums it all up. And people sometimes forget about the middle bit, loving yourself, which is a bit what we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
And that's linked to with the loving God part, which is what we've been talking about, the meditation or different forms of prayer or whatever you want to call it. And then you've got to go out and make the world a better place by the way you treat other people.
And so could you put a modern spin on love God?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's that sort of, being, for everlastingly on your knees, beating your breasts.
Yeah, that's right.
Which maybe was the image that sometimes came across in the past. But I think just treating the mystery we call God, however you see that, as a friend, not someone to be feared, someone who can be close, if you want that, and someone who's open to that. And so the different forms of getting in touch, and as I said, the one that works for me really well is this mantra style meditation every day. Other people like to, use their imaginations and sort of chat to the mystery we call God or whatever. I don't think it matters which way you do it.
Yeah.
It's all equally valid. But different people find different things suit them.
I wanted to, at some point in our convo, throw a bit of a curveball here.
Right.
Because, it's something that I've been quite fascinated with, and something I've had a personal experience with is the use of psychedelic drugs.
Okay.
And it's with psilocybin in mushrooms. There are people that drink a brew in Peru and the Amazon called ayahuasca and all this sort of stuff. And these drugs have drugs, or some people call them plant medicines and everything. But they've been shown to really, really almost shut off the egotistical side of the brain. I think it's the prefrontal cortex, or wherever the thinking occurs in the brain.
Prefrontal
cortex. Yep. And then put you just in touch with yourself completely. Have you ever studied that before? Or?
No, I haven't. I really haven't had much experience in that at all.
Yeah.
I have read bits about it and seen TV programs where people take these things and literally go into a trance-like state.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Start chanting.
But yeah, I just don't have any. I find it hard to relate to because it's so different from anything I've ever experienced or come across.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was interesting because, I mean, these are people that, they've been smoking all their life, they've been depressed for 20 years, they've been highly anxious, and they'll have these things and they'll just get a closer relationship with themselves, I guess I really think is the fundamental thing, But it'd be interesting for me to see the modern, Christianity 20 years or something. It's like, here's your mushroom. It's fascinating. I think it'd be great. I love it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. I know. And so what are you studying now?
Okay, so now I'm studying what's called spiritual direction. As I said earlier, I think it's better called spiritual accompaniment, where you train to become someone who is can help facilitate another person's relationship with God. So you don't do it by telling them what to do, you don't do it by this, but you listen very closely. You become a very good listener, and you might hear the person say something that they haven't been aware of, and you can reflect that back to them. So the people who come to you would be people who want to grow their relationship with God, and so they come to you to get that help once a week or whatever it is, once a month or whatever, or on a retreat, a Christian directed retreat. In the Catholic tradition has that sort of thing where the person meets the director once a day, and the rest of the day they're in silence and getting in touch with their inner self and God. But once a day you meet with the director or the accompanier, and you talk about what's going on deep down. And so that's what I'm training for at the moment.
Okay.
So I'm doing it through what's called the Ignatian tradition, which Ignatius of Loyola was the founder of the Jesuits, and he was the great saint, I suppose, in history who got in touch with his inner feelings and realised that God can talk to you through your feelings, and he talked about feelings of consolation when you feel really happy and peaceful and good with life, and feelings of desolation where you feel pretty lousy. And he worked out that God can speak to us through those times, and that if you can get in touch with that, you can sense the right way to go forward in your life. What gives you a deep sense of consolation is the way forward, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm sort of doing, it's a bit academic, some of the studies, and some of it's very practical.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying it.
And so your first semester done?
First semester will be done in 4 weeks' time.
Yeah.
I complete all my papers.
Yes.
And then I have a break and I come back for semester 2. And then I've broken the back of the course, but I've got some more part-time work to do after that. So whether I'll be full-time next year or go back to Adelaide, do it part-time, is still to be decided. So.
You were mentioning before how, it's about, they all go on retreats and things, and you have one chat, I think, is with your...
The person who's directing you or accompanying you once a day. If you go on a 6-day retreat, they meet you in the morning or whatever, and they listen to you. They might make a few suggestions, there's a few gospel stories or something else to think about, to use your imagination with, and then you come back the next day and say, well, this is what happened.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
This is how it went, or I just got nowhere, or whatever, and you try to help them. They try to help you go forward. Yeah.
I just have you ever thought about, I don't know, doing some sort of thing with other religions as well? And I mean, Buddhism just literally sounds so much like what's going on here,
Yeah, well, Buddhism is very much into meditation and going deep down and quietening your monkey mind that's jumping around all the time and trying to get in touch with the deeper self. I think the only difference really is that Buddhists don't have this concept of a personal God so much as a deep inner peace. But I think they're open to that interpretation. But I haven't said a lot about it, but the bit I've read about Buddhism seems by and large a very peaceful religion. And but I think all the world religions, even the ones that have a bad press at the moment, like perhaps Islam's got a bit of a bad press at the moment, but unfortunately that's dictated to by the extreme few fundamentalists.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think the people who follow Islam, they have a window into God. People who follow Buddhism have a window into God. Christians and Catholics have a window into God. None of us have the total window because God's always going to be a mystery, but we try to learn our bit, and you find the path that's really meaningful for you, I think, and for me that has been the Catholic Christian path.
Yeah. And was there ever a time where you wanted to learn more about the other ones, or was it always just kind of...
Yeah, and particularly in some of my teaching, we did a bit of comparative religion in our school. So my last school I was at in Adelaide, we did a unit on Islam and Christianity.
Right.
And looking at, we took the boys to the mosque and we took them to the cathedral.
Oh, wow.
And they loved that day, and we looked at, what was in the different places of worship and what the meanings were. And we had a person speak to them from the mosque and a person from the cathedral. And so I've read a bit of the other religions. Judaism, of course, because so strongly influences Christianity. So the big four, I haven't read a lot about Hinduism and some of the others, but the big four I have.
I've actually just started reading the Bhagavad Gita, which is like a
sacred scriptures.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting. And then I started reading this other one called Life Comes from Life, which is a book. It's like an excerpt of like conversations that I think it was a Buddhist monk, but I thought it was something to do with Hinduism. Anyway, he was having with his students and someone who just didn't know. It was just like walking along and documenting, and it was like in the 70s at the turn when science was getting big, and he was basically just having a go at science, really.
Right.
But through this sort of spiritual connotation. So it was really interesting because I've never read anything that's just so against what I had historically read so much of. It was fascinating.
Yes, and of course the sad thing is there doesn't have to be that clash between religion and science that there was, unless you're a literalist.
Of course.
If you're a literalist, well, there's going to be a clash.
Yes.
But in our case, if you study the Bible and you see that different books are written for different reasons, different times, different purposes, and some of them aren't meant to be literally, scientifically true, like the story in Genesis is a beautiful metaphor about the creation of God. It's not meant to be a scientific description. So there doesn't have to be that great clash that there was. But for literalists, there always will be, sadly.
Of course. Just to play devil's advocate a bit here, how do we know that the parts in Genesis and the Old Testament stuff were never meant to be literal? Because obviously for thousands of years we've thought they were.
Yeah, some people did for a long time. Yeah. In the last 150 to 200 years, there was a great outburst of biblical scholarship. And I have to say, it didn't start with the Catholic Church, it started with the Protestant Christians.
Right.
They were great into the early biblical scholarship. And Catholics sort of came on board around about the 1940s when Pope Pius XII said, yes, go for it, it's good.
Right.
And people then became experts at studying the different types of genres in the Bible and realising, well, these are not all the same, they're not all history. Some books are historical, but some are not. And even in the Gospels, some parts are historical, some are not. So there's different genres, and people have learnt, and the experts, the real biblical scholars, can tell you the different types of writings in the Bible and what in general they were meant to do. So the parables, stories that Jesus told, for example, aren't literally true, but they teach us wonderful lessons about life. In Genesis, there were, it was probably written, I think, somewhere about 600 or 700 BC, when the Jewish people were living next to other people who had their own creation stories, and they said, well, how do we, who believe in one God, how do we describe creation? So someone wrote that story to put it in a sort of a context of the lessons behind creation.
Right, okay.
But yeah, they weren't scientists, and they didn't know anywhere near what we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
About the development of the universe and all of the 13.5 billion years of the universe's history, etc. Yeah.
And so, if we take on that understanding of, these were parables and these were historical, how much of we'll talk about Jesus now, how much of Jesus's life do we assume to be historically accurate? And I'm talking specifically about really the resurrection here.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
there are 4 Gospels, but there were actually more, some that weren't accepted in the early church, but they accepted the 4 that we've got as being the sort of most, accurate or something.
Okay.
3 are very similar. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very similar, and they start with the story of Jesus' life going through to his death and his resurrection. John's Gospel is a bit more theological and was written later. I think about 40 years later, about 100 AD. So, there's sort of common things in all the Gospels, like the story of the passion of Jesus suffering and being put to death on a cross is similar and the same in all the 4 Gospels, but some little parts are different, obviously. And they think that's because they weren't written down Like the first one was probably written about 70 AD,
Mm.
and Jesus died somewhere around 27 AD or something like that. You can argue about that depending on the years.
Yeah.
But people shared stories. They had this oral tradition. They shared stories and handed them down for about 30 or 40 years. And then eventually somebody said, we better write these down. So they were written down according to the different traditions that were handed down.
Right.
So different people remember different things, emphasise different things, and all of that. So within all of that, the historical person, Jesus of Nazareth, comes through. But you can't say, well, that's exactly...
Of course.
That's exactly... You've got to pick up the general picture of the man coming through. When you get to the resurrection part, I think that's where faith kicks in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because the rest is pretty historically accurate. There are references to Jesus in other writings. One of the Roman historians mentions this person called Chrestus, who caused trouble in Palestine.
Oh, right.
So there's,
You can assume that.
you can assume Jesus really existed. I
Of
think
course.
there's enough proof of that. When you get to the resurrection, of course, you're into the realm of belief and faith and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there seems to have been, amongst the early followers, a genuine conviction that something dramatic happened.
Right.
And that's the way they described it.
Yeah, and is that in all 4 Gospels?
Yes,
Yeah.
the stories are slightly different. There are different resurrection stories in different Gospels, but they all have that to one degree or another.
Mm.
Mark's Gospel is the first, and it describes initially, it had a couple of endings, and its first ending finished with an empty tomb, question mark.
Yep.
And then somebody wrote another chapter, I think, a bit later. But they all have that concept there, one way or the other, yeah.
Okay. And then just so I'm completely aware of it, so it was the understanding that on the 3rd day when they went to visit his tomb, the human form, or the body wasn't there. Did anyone actually, and then from what I remember, it was just he descended into heaven, but did anyone have any, I believe Doubting Thomas did or something.
Yeah, there were some stories in the different Gospels about what are called resurrection appearances,
Yeah.
where people had this experience, like we were talking about some of the religious experiences earlier.
Cool.
They had this experience of the risen Christ being present to them,
Mm.
and they're described in the different Gospels.
Really? Okay. So
Doubting Thomas was one, and the disciples.
it's a good name, Thomas. I'm not doubting.
Yeah. So yeah, there's it's just somehow those early Christians had that experience, and
Yeah.
that belief came strongly to them.
And I think, as general as we want to be, this was a dude who helped a lot of people out, and I think, however far you want to go down not really just the word rabbit hole, but of saying, this happened, at the end of the day, it was just a guy that seemed to have a big impact positively on people's lives, and I think that's really great,
Yeah, and was ultimately killed because he trod on the toes of the really influential religious leaders of the time by questioning things and asking questions to the point where they thought he was dangerous.
Yeah, and I think that's very powerful and important for sure. I think it's always important to seek your own truth, question and look for answers and all that sort of stuff, and never just agree blindly, or blind faith, I guess you would call it, and that sort of thing. Yeah,
exactly right.
Yeah. Johnny, I wanted to finish this conversation off with a bit of a blunt question, but what do you think happens when we die?
Oh wow! I wish I knew for sure.
You're under oath, mate.
Yeah, well, again, nobody's ever died and come back to tell us, have they?
It's true.
So again,
there was this one guy actually, mate.
Yes, true. So we sort of enter again the realms of belief and faith. It's interesting that it's not just in Christianity, but there's a common strand right through the world, I find, of people believing there's something beyond death. Like even people I find who are completely secular will put notices in the paper when someone very close to them has died, saying, now at peace and until we meet again, or that sort of concept. There's this sort of, it seems to be in our DNA, this sort of belief that there's something beyond death. And as I say, we can't prove it, and there's no one's come back to tell us, oh, well, this is exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's sort of something there that, and I've met people who've got this really strong absolute belief. You might remember a man named Len, who's a good friend of Mum's.
Yeah.
When he was dying, he said to me, "Oh, I can't wait to die.
Really?
I can't wait to die and get to heaven." And I thought, wow, your faith is so much stronger than mine,
Yeah.
because I can't see myself quite saying that at the moment.
No.
But at the same time, I do have this inner belief that there's something beyond death, a form of spiritual existence, or whatever you want to call it. And hopefully, I often say we go to God,
Yeah.
and that there's something in that. But beyond that, I find it hard to say much more.
Yeah, yeah. To bring that psychedelic thing back into it as well. Lots of people say they when they have a lot, or when they have under the right circumstances, they experience this thing called ego death, which is this complete disembodiment from your human form, and they feel like they go to this place where they understand exactly what happens when they die, and it's like that feeling of going to God, I believe, is described as this just understanding of the universe and the power of the universe and all that sort of stuff. And I think what really helps me is just understanding that there's so much I don't know. So it's always good to keep the ego in check.
That's very true. There's a lot we don't know, because so much of it is mystery.
Yeah. Yeah, and even to the point where I don't know that I don't know things,
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. Johnny, thank you so much, mate.
Pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely loved it. Beautiful.
Good on you.
And may the force be with you.
And also with you.
Great.